Okay. So with that long rant aside, these are the variables I'm going to use in the global data. And I can always make a note. I'm going to do this. I just said not to. Change the behavior of code. And now I'm going to be a complete hypocrite. Unused equals 0. Or 0, right? Okay, so basically, as I'm, working on this code, I really don't want to have to worry about, oh god, one of these needs to not have a comma. So I'm just going to make that variable up there. So now I can have commas before everything, and I don't have to worry about changing the comma as I'm shuffling things around. And there I go, being a complete hypocrite, because, I already told you, don't be changing the behavior of your code just to make it syntactically different and easier to work with. And this is exactly what I'm doing, right? Because this changes the execution of the code, right? Now, it doesn't change the end result, right? Because we're not going to use this variable, but that 0 still has to be allocated, right? And sure, most of the time, if you do something like that, it's not going to make a difference, but you're adding more complexity, and therefore you are increasing the risk of more things going wrong, and just so that you can, format something in a certain way. So, should I heed my own advice or not? Well, one thing we could do is, if we really want to heed that advice and we just want this temporarily, we could make it very obnoxious. It could be like, this is, only temporary. Remove this variable once the code is working. Alright, okay, thanks. Alright, I said I forgot how they do that. Thanks, bye. Okay, thanks, bye. Yeah. So we could do that, and that is just really annoying. And that way I know to, get rid of that later, because, it sticks out like a sore thumb now. And that way, as I'm working with this, I can, shuffle that around like that, and I don't have to worry that, about, adding and deleting these, leading commas. So I think I'll do that. So I'm going to make a note above these variables. Or actually, you know what? I'm not going to make the note there. So to kind of get the best of both worlds, what I can do is use the comments like this, right? I could do this, dot, right? Because this is kind of what I'm... Syntactically, this is what I wanted to achieve, but, we don't have to do that, so we can just do this, right? And then we can... Right, so now I've made a little compromise. So instead of nesting my data structure deeper, I've made unique variables, and then if I want to have a little bit of that nice click behavior to see patterns, I just cut and paste these. Actually, that would have been easier if I did that all in one step, so I should have just done it like this. Oh boy, not that. Oh god, oh god. Control Z, Control Z. Okay, so let's Control Z a few more times. Okay, so what you can do, so I'm alt-clicking here. Pro tip. That's why I use Notepad++ all the time. So we could go Alt-Select, and then copy that to the clipboard, and then we'll put a comment here, and then we'll Alt-Select and drag, and then we'll do Control-V, and then Alt-Select right in the middle right there, and just put a dot, right? And now you can see all the nice connections of like how the data is related to each other just by like double clicking things and seeing what related terms are highlighting. Sublime will let you do the same thing with like a multi-cursor thing, where you can click, 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 and have a cursor on multiple lines at the same time. And one of the advantages in Sublime is that you don't have to have it perfectly aligned to do that, because you'll like click, click, click where you want the cursors to start on the different lines, and they don't have to be vertically aligned. Which is great if you're working in a code base where the code isn't aligned like this, where somebody isn't totally OCD in aligning things like this, but you still need to edit multiple lines at once. Then Sublime might be a better choice than Notepad++. But for whatever reason, middle mouse button for column select really annoys the hell out of me for some reason. And that's how you do it in Sublime. Okay, so how many hours has it taken me to make 4 variables? Like what, 40 minutes to an hour? So yeah, well, I guess this is code toad slow, so I guess I'm keeping true to that ethos. But yeah, can we get this fucking thing running already? Create texture. Let's just create both of the textures at the same time. So we know they're texture handles because we already looked at the documentation. So we should be able to just do the ISO memory and the main memory. And right now we have 2 separate texture handles. And let's see, active texture. So this global data dot blah blah blah. Oh yeah, this is inside of global data, isn't it? So it's still. I'm gonna keep at least the global data nesting because this stuff needs to be eventually integrated with the other code base, and we don't want like completely loose variables all over the place. Like we're not getting that procedural up in here. We're going to use a little bit of object orientation. Okay. So preserve variables on GPU side and return handles. That's a very long sentence. I don't like how close it is to the edge. We'll just do that. Okay, so that's, as far as my understanding, this is what's going on. Reserve variables on GPU and return handles to them. Right, and these variables are specifically for textures, right? So it hasn't actually created the memory for these textures, but it has set aside like a variable name on the GPU side, or on or you could say on the API side, right? But and why is that? Why do you have to do it that way? So I guess if we're going to go with the array analogy of handles, you could say that OpenGL has gone through like this array of where it holds all of its textures, and it's looked for a slot that's currently empty, right? That has like a null in it, let's say. So like say GL's array of textures entry 0 is null, right? So it says, oh, that one's 0. Okay, so we'll return 0 in that texture handle. And then you call it again, and it's like, oh, that 0, there's nothing there in slot 0, but oh, we already gave it out, right, earlier, so it's already been reserved, so we're not going to do anything with it. So we're going to go to the next slot, and oh, in our big array on the API side, we haven't given away the texture for slot number 0 in this array. So we'll give this we'll give them a 1 this time, right? So that's kind of what's going on. The texture, it says create texture, but really what it is it's like a it's like getting a voucher for a texture almost. It's like to use a house analogy, and if this was like called create house, this would actually just give you the address to where your house is going to be. But right now, at that address, there's just like a plot of land, right? There's no actual house there. But when the next guy comes around to the land agency or whatever, and they're like, oh, I would also like a house. All right, create house, and then they get another address to another plot of land, but there's not actually a house there, right? And in the same vein, there's not actually a texture there, but we have that kind of like reserved now. Okay, so GL active texture. OpenGL is a state machine. So let's see, global data. We're gonna change this to the. Are we gonna? I don't know which one we're gonna do first. Okay. So, ooh, what am I doing? We need the texture, not the texture handle, but the texture slot. So remember, texture 0 plus whatever the texture slot is will get us right, because all the values, all these different texture constants, texture 0, texture 1, 2, 3, etc., they're all sequential. So you can just add an offset to texture 0. And now I realize something that I did not do. I have to decide on... I decided on these earlier, but then I deleted code. So for these texture slots, we're going to need... and it was the main memory that I wanted to use texture slot 0, so we'll use a 1 there, and also just... in general, I forgot to to properly fill out these data. The syntax is wrong, right? And people probably already saw this. And we probably should use like different trap values for both of these, right? So that works. And then also, align that comment. Okay, texture handles, texture slots. So once again, we can, do that to make sure that it's the texture slots that are the 0 and the 1, and that checks out. Okay, and then bind texture, and this will be one of the texture handles, right? So we are working with the ISO memory first. So we'll take this and do that. And now the question is, do we want to just do this all on one long line, or do we want to do this? I mean, we got enough room. Usually I don't like lines that are really that long, but we can see that we can quickly see that these are both the same. They're related variables, right? So that's going to help us catch accidents like this, right? Because it's lined up. So I do like that aspect, right? So it's all a balancing act. And we're not over our column limits, so I'd say, yeah, let's go with that. Active texture, bind texture, and then this is okay, and this is for bind. Yep. Okay. So let's take all this, put this here, And then we'll just do like a... Oh wait, no, what am I doing? And then, what the hell is T2? Oh, GL texture 2D. Oh, I can kind of see why I did that, because we are running out of space. Near edge. T2 is texture 2D. I'm going to do that. So like I said, I am changing the execution of the code to, like, you know, help with the syntax. Right, I'm adding more moving parts only to appease my aesthetic choices, which is not the smartest thing to do, but the verbosity, sometimes just annoys the hell out of me. So I'm gonna keep that, but I'm not gonna get as crazy as with that the weird binding stuff, like the function binding in JavaScript. Let's try not to do stuff that weird in this code. So min filter, mag filter, texture wrap S and T. So this kind of has to do with how your texture is going to react to texture sampling. Near and edge. I can't remember exactly how these all work. I just know these are the ones I need for using an integer texture, where I'm actually storing you know, bit packed information in that texture, right? I can't have any type of weird distortion happening. I guess what we could do is, since we're here and since we're taking too much time with everything, well, we might as well look up what that is as well. Texture min filter. GL text parameter. And then we'll go Control F, pname. Okay, pname specifies a symbolic name. Pname can be one of the following: GL texture min filter, GL texture mag filter, wrap S, wrap T. And wrap S and wrap T are they're coordinates. I forgot what the coordinate types are, but they're kind of like, you know, there's like UVW. Well, there's also like ST, right? There's like XYZ, UVW, and then S and T. And I forgot what S and T are used for. I knew at one point for a brief moment in time, and then I forgot again, because it's not like I just don't do this enough to have that remembered. GL text parameter, GL text parameter F and I. So they don't really explain this in the documentation ever, but parameter F, I can almost guarantee to you that that is parameter float. GL text parameter with the I can almost guarantee you that is integer. Oh yeah, and yeah, because we see GL float here, and then we see GL int here, and that's the only thing that varies in the signature. So you got to remember, in C, there's no such thing as operator overloading in C. Or sorry, not, well, that is also true. That is also true. But that's not what I meant. There's no such thing as function overloading in plain C. So these two functions, this is basically the C version of function overloading, right? So when you're looking at documentation, sometimes it's confusing because it'll refer to something like GL text parameter, and you'll like be searching a code base for GL text parameter, and you'll never find it because it doesn't actually exist, because somebody might refer to GL text parameter, and they mean, when they say that, they mean either text parameter f or text parameter I, right? So when you're talking about these functions, in a more generalized way, and you're talking about both of these functions at the same time, you just leave off the f and I and just say that, and that can be really confusing if you're not used to that and you just don't understand what people are saying. Really, target, specify the target texture of the active texture. Which okay, description. Texture mapping is a technique that applies to an image onto an object surface. Oh, the image is created in texture space with an S and T coordinate system. Okay, so S and T are texture space coordinates. Okay. A texture is a two-dimensional or cube-mapped image, and a set of parameters determine how samples are derived from the image. GL text parameter assigns the value or values and params to the texture parameter specified as pname. Target defines the... Okay. Okay, let's look at GL texture min filter. Okay, so it looks like the GL nearest for the GL texture min filter is like nearest neighbor, right? So it basically means don't do any weird anti-alias blurring, right? And that's what we need because we're encoding very specific binary values in our texture, right? That's why we have the integer texture, because we're going to like bitpack different values in those channels when we want to interpret the pixels as different tile types with different attributes. And so we can't have any weird interpolation happening to our pixels. So GL nearest is going to do nearest neighbor, and it's not going to distort or blend any of the pixel values. And linear won't do that. Linear is going to like average 2 pixels, and we can't have that. That'll corrupt our data. So looking through this texture wrap, I believe we're like, are we clamping to the edge? Yeah, we're clamping to the edge. Yeah, and that makes sense. So we don't want the texture like repeating or anything. We just don't want any like weird stuff happening. We just want to use the texture as this like image that we're sampling from to get data. So we don't want to like, we want to try to not distort anything in weird ways. So we're reading through that and then looking at this document, these calls here. We've kind of figured out what this does, right? So texture parameter is kind of like, well, first of all, you notice we're using the eyes, and that's because we are using, God, is that because we're using integer texture, or just like change between or GL float params? Oh, no, okay, it's, no, it's just because these are, these enumerations are integers. That's why we're using the I version of the function. And if for some reason the last parameters are float, then we use the Fs. But right, so this is like a family of functions. You can think of this function as more of a family of functions, and then the gl.texture2d, that is the second parameter. This is like the specific function within that family of functions. So you could think of like this function as having like a huge if-else statement in it, and then the sub-function names are in that if-else, and this is the sub-function, right? Texture2d. And then but yeah, you can think of, or sub-functions might not be the best word. You can think of it as like sub-categorization. But yeah, but but yeah, thinking of these constants as just normal parameters, I don't think is the best abstraction, right? Because these are the parameters at the very end, and this is just like kind of like specifying the actual functionality you're trying to execute. I don't know. I don't know. Abstract it however you want to abstract it. Read the documentation. Come up with your own mental model. But that's the way I kind of cope with this weirdness and try to understand it. So we can get rid of this weird comment here. And before pushing set alignment. So this is like to go with that house analogy. Pushing, which would be like, this is the push right here. This is when that plot of land that you've reserved will now have, that house on it. And I gotta stop recording because